What if I told you that one cold call framework could turn your most terrifying prospecting activity into your competitive advantage? Most B2B tech sales reps completely avoid cold calling because they think it doesn't work anymore. Meanwhile, those who master it are meeting with CXO level individuals and other technical buyers who want to take their calls while others are chasing warm leads. Quick background on me: I've been in B2B tech sales for over 19 years and I've sold over $185 million in my career, and I've hit 15 straight President's Clubs, and I'll probably hit my 16th somewhere around April or May. So I'm still selling just like you. I currently coach B2B tech sales professionals, and cold calling is still one of the most effective outreach methods we use today. But here's what I hate most about cold calling advice: it's mostly generic sales training that doesn't understand or take into account the unique challenges selling to C-level executives and other technical leaders that are different from other B2B buyers. They're more skeptical, they're more analytical, and they can smell a generic cold call pitch a mile away. So today, this isn't going to be your typical smile and dial cold call training. This is specifically for beginners in tech sales that need to get meetings fast and like right now with technical buyers and other C-level executives so you can book meetings and start filling your pipeline. Let's start with reality. Cold calling in tech sales is hard, and it's hard because your buyers are super busy, they're skeptical, and they're getting thousands of calls a month from other sales reps selling software, hardware, on all kinds of different IT services. And secondly, they're technical people, so they don't want a generic pitch. They want specifics. They don't want to talk about increasing efficiency or ROI because that's just pie in the sky stuff. They want specifics, and they're technical, and you need to be fairly technical too. And also, they've most likely been burned before from vendors that overpromised, underdelivered, bad implementations, and so they just don't trust sales reps in general. But here's why cold calling still works. Number one, decision makers still answer their phones. And secondly, your competitors aren't really making cold calls, and because they're not making cold calls, that means less competition for you. And on that same note, because you're making a cold call, you can have a real conversation with a real human being instead of just sending emails into the void. And also, because you're talking to a real human being, you can handle objections right there on the spot, which you can't do with cold email. And lastly, this is pretty obvious, but when you're talking to a human being on the other end of the phone, you can build rapport fairly quickly, which you just can't do via email or LinkedIn. Now, the key is approaching cold calling the right way. Now, before we dive into technique, you need to understand the purpose of cold calling. The purpose of cold calling is to sell time. It's not to sell your product. So you're not trying to explain your entire product or solution on that call. You're just trying to create enough curiosity and interest so that they want to have a 15 to 30 minute proper discovery conversation. And this is huge for beginners because it takes the pressure off. You don't need to be a product expert that can answer every single technical question. You just need to be curious about their challenges and articulate well enough that it warrants a follow-up conversation. Now, here's my framework for beginners in tech sales. Actually, anyone in tech sales, because I still use this to sell into Fortune 100 clients to book meetings. Now, this is where most beginners fail because they sound like every other sales rep. So let's talk about what a bad opening sounds like. A bad opening might sound like, "Hi, this is John from ABC Company. We help clients create efficiencies and reduce costs through our cloud-based platform." Sounds pretty good, but kind of average, and it kind of sounds like everybody else. Now, let's get into a good opener. Now, a good opener, there's lots of variations of this. And yes, you've probably seen lots of variations on LinkedIn. But if you're a beginner or you're selling a new territory or a new product, or if you're brand new to tech sales, you don't want a lot of pressure. And you want to feel confident in that first 1 to 2 questions or statements that you make. So here's how it works. "Hi, this is Eric from Tech Systems. I know I caught you totally out of the blue. But if I take a minute to tell you why I'm calling, and if it doesn't make sense for us to talk, just let me know. No sweat." The reason this works is because number one, you're asking for permission. Number two, you're giving them an out, right? So people don't like to be stuck on a cold call that they're not agreeing to because you are calling them out of blue. You're interrupting them in the middle of what they're doing. So give them an out. It lowers the pressure or removes the friction, which is really important in all facets of sales. Now let's get into the next part of the cold call, which is the reason. So if you're cold calling someone, they agree to take a few moments to talk to you. You need to give them a reason to keep listening. When you give them a reason, you got to mention something specific, a trigger, something relevant to them that you've researched, observed, or verified. So in this case, I might notice that I'm talking to other people like them, the same persona or job title, that are struggling with a specific challenge. That's one way to do it. Or it could be something you saw on LinkedIn, an article you read, something you saw in their annual report. So in this case, I'm just going to do something that is easy for all of you because it's on LinkedIn and every B2B sales rep uses LinkedIn. So here's how that sounds. "Hey, I noticed you guys had a job posting for an identity management engineer posted on LinkedIn. And typically in talking with most CISOs and other identity management directors, the reason they're posting those jobs is because they're preparing for a brand new identity governance and administration software implementation, or they just got done with an implementation and they now have additional enhancements they have to make. Or third, they need to manage and run that platform, and it can be really challenging to find those types of resources. Are any of those on your mind, or am I totally off base? After you mentioned that trigger, in this case, what I used was I saw you had a job posting for an identity management engineer. Then you have to give context for why that trigger matters. So in this case, I said, hey, typically when companies have a job posting for that type of role, it's because of A, B, or C, and the specific challenges that come along with that. That's the context you have to give. And lastly, I just simply ask, are any of those three on your mind, or am I totally off base? So I give them an out, but I say, hey, I mentioned these three challenges. They're very specific. I did my homework. Am I on target or am I off base? And if you're off base, they will tell you, which allows you to have a conversation. You can go, oh, interesting, my mistake. What is on your mind? Do you mind sharing? And then they can elaborate in a lot of cases. Sometimes they won't, but in a lot of cases, because they're on the line, they'll tell you because you were specific enough with the trigger that you observed and verified or researched that they're going to tell you a little bit more. Now let's move to step three, the conversation starter stage. Now, this is where you're transitioning from kind of your pitch to the conversation, which you're trying to sell, but it's not going to be a long conversation. It's going to be short. And you're going to be asking diagnostic based questions to better understand their unique challenges. Some of those questions could be like this: how are you currently handling that challenge? How long has that been a challenge for you? What have you tried so far? What other solutions are you looking at to solve for that? What's at stake if you don't solve it? And is there a specific deadline tied to achieving that? Those are all diagnostic based questions, and you need to be listening closely. If you can have a recording tool on like Gong or something that's going to transcribe your notes, is super helpful. But if you don't, just make sure you're truly actively listening and not just looking at your agenda of your call script or like, what's the next question I need to ask? You need to actively listen because sometimes they're going to go into a lot of depth and answer your next two, three, four, five questions. And you don't want to miss something that's critically important, that's actually their business challenge, which is what you're trying to zero in on in the first place. So some of the things you're listening for that are pain indicators are manual processes, system limitations, time-consuming workarounds, could be compliance concerns or risk concerns, or even integration challenges. Now, it's really important to note that these alone are not enough to go close a deal because these are surface level pain issues and we have to get to a business problem that has to be solved. But typically, when you're cold calling, they're going to start at surface level technical problems. But when you get into your discovery call, you're going to dive deeper and ask deeper questions with context to find out what the root cause of their problems are. So then you can then sell your solution and bridge the gap. But that's not what we're here to do on the cold call. We're just trying to get enough information that there's going to be enough curiosity and interest to book a full discovery call so you can dive in deeper. So let's go to the example I gave. I said, hey, the trigger, right, was an identity management engineer job posting. And then I said, is it bucket A, bucket B, or bucket C? And let's just say they chose bucket A as, yeah, we're going to be implementing a brand new platform. That's why we're posting this job, as we know we're going to need staff to support it. And I go, okay, interesting. And I might ask, how long have you been planning for that? And they go, oh, the better part of a year. And it's like, okay, well, curious, what's driving that decision? Well, what's driving it is that the existing platform we have has been in existence for 10 plus years. It's age, it's got a non-cloud based infrastructure, and it just doesn't work with the size of our company. We acquire companies all the time. We've got a lot of enterprise applications. We always hire new people and new contractors. And so we need something that's more mature and modernized that is going to align with our unique business needs. And I might go, okay, anything else is driving that decision? Like, is it very manual or anything like that? And it's costing you a lot of money over time. And it's like, yeah, we've actually had to hire big teams of people and big managed service contracts because it requires so much care and feeding. And what we're looking to do is get into a more modern platform that doesn't require all that staff just to maintain it and run our business. So those are actual pains, but they're not enough to get the deal done. But again, that's not why I'm making a cold call. The purpose of my cold call is eventually to sell time. So at this point, we need to move into the next stage. I've got a few areas of pain, and I need to move into the meeting request, which is asking for the meeting. Now, for most people, this is really uncomfortable. They usually tread really lightly about this, or they go in way too hard. So the first thing is that you don't want to ask for an hour. Again, you're still a stranger. They don't know you. they probably still don't trust you because in the back of their mind, they're already conditioned that you're going to be like every other sales rep. So you want to ask for, usually I would say about 30 minutes. I think that's the norm. 15 minutes is usually too little. And so when I ask for 20 to 30 minutes in most cases, knowing that there's going to be another call, and the way that I set this up is I'll go, hey, based on what you shared so far, we've seen this problem or this initiative across a lot of other customers in your industry or the same size as you. And there's a few things that usually come up that can really slow down the implementation of those tools, or they run into specific challenges. And I'd love to share with you how we're helping other customers with that, or at a bare minimum, just share what some of your industry peers are doing. Would it make sense to grab time for 20 to 30 minutes? And if they go, yeah, that sounds good, then I'm going to ask them to pull their calendar up right there on the spot. And I'll just say, hey, I've got my calendar up. Do you have yours up on your computer right now? Everybody does. I'll say, yeah, can you mind pulling that up real quick? Let's see if we can find a time. And I'll usually select 3 or 4 days from now. Now, based on their role, if they're like an executive, like a C-level executive, I might go, how do the next 3 to 5 days look on your calendar? Or do we need to push this out a couple weeks? The sooner the better, because the fact of the matter is they're going to forget about you. And so you don't want to push that out a month. Certainly, I've done that before if people are traveling and they have no time. But again, if it's something that's urgent, they're usually going to be willing to meet with you sooner rather than later. So I'll ask them, hey, how does Thursday at 2 o'clock look? They're going to say, yes, no, I can do 3, 4, yeah, 2 works. Here's what you don't want to do though. When they ask you, hey, how does next Thursday look? Do not say, yeah, I'm wide open. Here's why. I think this is obvious, but a lot of people do this. Heck, I've done this a ton in my career early on. I'll just say, yeah, I'm wide open to try to be flexible to them. But buyers want to work with top notch, top ranked salespeople that get the job done. They want to work with the top 1%. Do you think the top 1% is just available all the time? I can tell you, I'm in the top 1%, and my calendar is booked solid from 7 a.m. all the way to 5 p.m. and later every single day. I have to move meetings a lot of times because I'm so booked. And so you need to act like you are that person, even if you're not. Give them a couple openings and that's it. And if you can't do it that day, try to move it to the next day. And again, give them, 1, 2, 3. There's no hard line rule. Just don't say you're wide open because they don't want to work with that person. And you're also going to make yourself look really junior and they're going to be looking to work with a more experienced rep. Now, here's an alternative approach that's even a little bit shorter that you can also try. And I recommend you guys split test these, try one and keep track. You got to keep track of your data of, hey, I'm using this approach for 50 call attempts. I'm going to use this approach for another 50 and do that over a course of a month and see which one works better. Don't change too many elements in the framework I'm talking about, but you want to just change one and test it. You might find number one you might be more comfortable with, but secondly, you might find that one just works better. And so use that one, right? There's no hardlined advice in sales that only one method works. That doesn't exist. So don't ever believe that. So this other approach is just, hey, based on what you shared, it might make sense to have a 20, 30-minute conversation to unpack this a little further. Do you have time on Thursday or Friday for 30 minutes at either 2 or 4 o'clock? And they'll tell you yes or no, and you continue the call to get that meeting booked. Just make sure you get them to pull up your calendar before they get off that phone call and send them the calendar invite and get them to accept it while they're on the call. Don't hop off from the call until they've accepted it, because if you do, chances are, this has happened to me so many times and it happens to reps all the time, is they don't accept it and then they're gone. Then you try to get back a hold of them and they've disappeared and you've been ghosted. So you follow that framework, you get the meeting booked. Now we have to hop into objections because you're going to get objections when you cold call. So let's talk about the most common cold calling objections. Now let's talk about the most common objection that everybody fears. I did early on in my career. And now I think it's just kind of funny and I gamify this so it doesn't bother me at all, but it might bother you. And if it does, totally fair. You got to practice this stuff. But the most common is, I'm not interested. Now, I'm not interested is kind of a hard line, just ending the call. And so that's why it's so challenging. The wrong response would obviously be, I understand you're not interested, but let me tell you why you should be. That's way too aggressive, and that's just going to push people away. Instead, you need to lean into the obvious. So let's talk about what the right response would be. It's very simple. Acknowledge what they're saying. You have to use empathy. Hey, I completely understand. I'm sure you get calls like this all the time. The only reason I'm calling, and then you insert the trigger, which was in this case, I saw you had a job posting for a specific skill set. Is that something your team handles, or have you guys already solved that problem? and then just shut up and listen. But when you get this objection and they say, hey, no, we've already solved that problem, you have to accept their answer. I know there's a lot of advice out there. Keep digging, like all this high ticket stuff that you see on the internet around digging, digging, digging. It's a cold call. You're a stranger. At some point, you have to accept and respect their answer, empathize with the fact that you interrupted them. They might be preparing for a big meeting with their boss, and maybe they just need to let you go. Accept it and say, hey, totally understand. Mind if I try you at another time? And they'll typically say, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then you move on to the next one. Now, the next most common objection is we already have a vendor for that. And also really challenging because it kind of just kills the conversation right there. Now, the wrong way to handle that objection is, oh, yeah, well, we're different because blah, 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 blah. And then you over explain and you're then kind of insulting them because if they do have another vendor, you're telling them why you're better and their decision was wrong. So don't do that. Now, the right way to handle that would just be to say, hey, that's great. I'm curious. How long have you been working with them? Let them answer and then ask a follow up question. Hey, if you had to rewind the clock 6 months, is there anything that you would have set up differently if you could? Let them answer. They may or may not elaborate. Now, let's say they express a bunch of pains, but then they say, hey, you know what? I'm locked into a 3-year contract with XYZ vendor. Just doesn't make sense to have a conversation right now. You just have to accept it. Lean in, empathize. Hey, totally get it. If I was in your shoes, I probably wouldn't want to have another conversation with the vendor right now either. Hey, would it be all right if I checked in with you every quarter, see how things are going? And at some point, it may or may not be the right time to have a deeper conversation on this subject. And at a bare minimum, I'll continue to follow up. I'll add value and share some information that we're seeing in the industry. Would that be all right with you? And almost always they're going to say, yeah. Now, the key is you can't just follow up and check in from the time that you have that call, you need to send them valuable information, content that's about what they're responsible for in their organization to nurture that lead so that they're going to remember you. Don't just call and check in every quarter and go, hey, it's Eric from Texas. I'm just calling to check in, just calling to that's not valuable, right? You have to bring value to them, make deposits into the person and their business by sharing valuable information. So if and when they're ready for a change, they're going to think of you versus all the other sales reps that have just been calling them over and over again, not doing anything for them as someone that runs a portion of the business. Now, the next one is super common. Everybody faces it in tech sales and probably any type of B2B sales is send me some information. Now, the wrong way to handle is sure, what's your email address? Because how do you know what you're going to send them is going to be relevant to them? But the right way would be, hey, I'm happy to send some information over. Just so I send something over that's relevant to you, do you mind just taking a minute or two to explain what your current challenges and pain points are so that whatever I send you is actually going to be relevant to you and you actually will want to read it? They're going to explain, and then you get their email address and say, hey, I'll send this information over to you. Do you mind if I continue sending you information on this topic? Do you think that would be valuable? They're almost always going to say yes. So now you just open the door to continue nurturing that lead. And now you have an insider secret that a lot of the other sales reps don't have, and you can continue nurturing them with similar and like content to build rapport, build trust, so that if there ever is a problem that comes up that you can solve, they're going to take your call or email you versus the thousands of other sales reps that are just doing the spray and pray technique. Now let's talk about the final objection that you're going to hear most commonly, which is I'm busy right now. I'm busy right now in most cases is an honest answer. You called them, you interrupted them. It wasn't a scheduled call. And so the last thing you want to do is go, it'll just take a minute because you're not empathizing with the fact that you just called and interrupted them. So that's the wrong way. But the right way is just empathize and say, hey, yeah, totally understand. I called you out of the blue. You weren't expecting my call. What would be a better time to call to talk about X, Y, and Z? And sometimes they're going to go, oh, because you mentioned something that's relevant to them and it was just a blow off smokescreen objection. It wasn't that they really were too busy. They were just trying to get you off the phone. So that's why we have to do our research, because if you have the right trigger and you use in some cases a trigger and hey, context A, B, and C, they might go, oh, wait a second. I do want to talk about that. But at a minimum, you have to empathize with the fact, hey, you're right. I called you out of the blue. What's a better time? Ask them to pull up their calendar if you can. And then if you can, just book the call right there or just, hey, I'll call you back at that time. Thanks, and move along. But the last thing is you just cannot push them. Hey, it'll just take a minute because now they're just annoyed. It's like, you're not listening, salesperson. You got to listen. This isn't B2C high pressure sales, right? This is more strategic sales. So you have to accept people's answers and respect them and respect their time. Okay, we talked about the cold call framework. But before we make calls, we have to do something that's really important. You have to do your homework. It's the biggest mistake I see beginners make. They treat everybody the same. They're using the same script for every prospect, every company, and you will not win if you do that. So there's two types of research you want to do. There's company research and then there's individual research. So company research, which would be acquisitions, funding rounds, news articles, LinkedIn posts, their technology stack, which you can get from Zoom Info and a bunch of other different types of softwares that offer that information out. Any job postings on LinkedIn, like I just mentioned. LinkedIn Sales Navigator will even tell you if the company is growing. It'll even tell you where they're growing in different parts of their business. So if you sell a specific technology area and technology department is growing, might be a great time. If technology is contracting, it could potentially also be a good time if your software allows them to cut the amount of employees or staff they have. It really just comes down to the research that you've done on LinkedIn. And lastly, the company size and the industry they're in. In a lot of industries, industry relevant information is critically important, especially when you're making cold calls and just as important when you're sending cold emails. So you can reference their industry as well as their company. So if their company's got, 100,000 employees, there's a lot going on there. And so you could be like, hey, what we've seen at other companies that have 50 to 100,000 employees is the following. That makes you stand out amongst all the other sales reps who are using generic sales scripts and don't do any homework. And so that's going to just improve your chances of booking a meeting when you're making cold calls. Now, the next type is individual research. So this could be how long they've been in their current role, any previous companies that they've worked for, and their experience. So let's just say they just got promoted to a C-level executive role or a director, and previously they were a manager, or maybe they were in a different type of department at another company, and now they're in the security organization. Previously, they were on the marketing team. Could be a lot of different things. But again, those are things you can bring up on the call. They're going to make it more relevant to them. And it's a more personalized conversation versus one that's general and shows the person you did no homework. And again, you're wasting their time when you do that. And then the last one, which obviously works really well, is mutual connection. So when you go on LinkedIn or you were just networking, other people that you both know, you can use those mutual connections. It really warms up the call. And I think you obviously understand it's going to give you much greater odds of booking that call. And if you can get somebody you know to introduce you to that person and then you make a cold call, even better. You might even just say, hey, did so-and-so mention my name that I might be calling? And they're going to go, oh, yeah. Obviously, a much better situation. So use all the tools that are available to you. Now, a big part of research is preparing your talking points to your questions. Now, a big mistake most reps make is they just make the same questions for every single call. And that can be a mistake because one, you're probably calling on multiple different companies or different types of buyers. So you need to do some research and then build on that research because one of the challenges we have in tech sales is it can take a long time to do this research. And if we take too much time, we actually never get to the cold calling itself. So what I do is I use what are called swipe files. And all a swipe file is a Google Doc. You can put it in OneNote. And if I'm researching a specific industry, all the research on that industry, I'm going to host in a document. Then if I'm researching a specific persona or job title in that industry, I'm going to list all the research of the current challenges and priorities on that type of persona in that document as well. And every time I do more research, I keep adding to that. And I've actually built a swipe file that I've used ChatGPT. You can use Claude, you can use Copilot to help uncover this information and talk like an expert. But the thing is that the swipe file will help shorten your time to do relevant research so that when you're cold calling, you're going to sound like a master in their industry and show them that you understand their world. Use the swipe file method. I promise you, it will make your research so much shorter and you will show up like a master on your cold calls and you'll have so much more confidence than you do today. Again, it's down in the description. It's free, no charge to you. Now, what this swipe file is going to do is going to give you really strong opening statements about triggers in an industry. So if you're not selling to a Fortune 500 customer or anyone who's publicly traded, you're going to be able to reference specific industry challenges. You're also going to be able to reference specific challenges to their role because you keep compounding on that research in your swipe file. So you kind of just open it up. Oh, it's this type of buyer. And then you look and you're like, hey, challenges A, B, C, and D. Are any of these on your mind, right? And that way you're not starting from scratch every time when you call that same type of buyer at another customer. It's also going to allow you to prepare more technical questions when you're on that cold call. So if they start leaning into a certain pain point, you can then ask a follow-up question. And again, because you're building on that, you can just reference what's on your Google Doc or in your OneNote and go, oh, they said this. I've heard that before on a call. So the key here is that when you're having cold calls, you're going to be documenting information. And sometimes that information from those cold calls is gold. Even if you didn't book the meeting, they might share some really insightful information. Add it to your swipe file because you might be able to use that on another cold call. I do that all the time, and it makes me show up like an expert every single time. And lastly, in that swipe file document, you want to use all your success stories from similar or like companies. They don't have to be published case studies that are on your website. Those are great too, but you might have a lot of success stories or wins that your company just hasn't published anything that's public on their website, and you might have to just call some of your peers and be like, hey, I'm calling on the life sciences industry, or I'm calling on the financial services banking sector. What wins do we have? Document all those in there. So when you make a cold call, you got something to reference right over here on your screen. That way you don't have to remember it, and it's going to make your job way easier. So we've talked about doing our research, but there's another part that's really important, and that's practicing our delivery. When we're practicing our delivery, what I recommend is leaving yourself voicemails or record yourself on video. And you don't have to you can use Loom or whatever you want to use, but just you don't have to look right at the camera. Just look over there, because when you're cold calling, right, you're just picking up your phone, your cell phone and calling, or maybe you're using a headset and calling, but you're not looking at the prospect, right? It's not a video call. So you don't have to look at the camera, just look out the window or look out in your office, whatever you're doing, and practice your intro. Practice the context and the trigger related question and statements. Practice objection handling, and you're going to be looking for a few things. And you got to do this a lot of times. Like when I was starting out, I would make flashcards at night, every night. I'd spend 15 to 20 minutes every single night over and over and over again. And it just became so comfortable. And I'm looking for a few things. What's my tonality? Is it, hi, this is Eric Fisher from Tech Systems, which is an upward tonality, which is no good? Or is it a downward tonality, downward inflection? Hey, this is Eric Fisher from Tech Systems. One, makes you sound like you're overly excited and you're inexperienced and junior. Two, makes you sound like you're a top 1% rep because you don't need the lead and you're demonstrating power and authority, which is what you want on a call. You're not being rude. You're not being arrogant. It's just downward. Hey, this is Eric Fisher from Tech Systems. You mind if you take a few moments to tell you why I called? Not attached. There's no attachment to the outcome. I'm super calm. I'm cool. I'm collected. I'm not talking too fast. I'm slowing down my heart rate. I'm not using a bunch of filler words like ums and ahs. I'm not using really awkward pauses because I'm getting stuck, because I'm really practiced and I've rehearsed this over and over again. Now, are we trying to sound like a robot and really scripted? No. The more you practice it, the more you're going to get into a flow state of using your own language and ad-libbing. It's not about saying every word exactly like I've taught you. It's about using the framework. That's why the framework is better than the scripts. Again, I'll put the framework and the cold calling framework in the description below so you have that document to help you out. But the key here is, again, you have to practice it. And the analogy I always use is professional athletes spend 80 to 90% of their career practicing. 10% is spent in the game. But as salespeople, how often do we practice versus actually be in the game? When we're cold calling, when we're sending emails, when we're doing discovery calls, when we're doing demos, that's the game. We're performing, but you never practice. So how do you expect to be good? The best salespeople I know practice like they're an athlete, professional athlete. So take this seriously, if anything. Practice. Even if you use the wrong framework, if you practice it over and over, you'd probably still get pretty good results. So just don't take that part lightly. A lot of you aren't going to listen to this, but I hope you do, because it'll make you a 10 times better sales rep. Now, here's the biggest mistakes I see from beginners. Number one, they talk way too much. Cold calls should be 70% listening, 30% talking. So ask your questions and then shut your mouth and actively listen. Take notes. Think about what they're saying. Don't just walk through what you have on a piece of paper. And that goes for discovery calls too. You need to listen 70 to 80% of the time, talk only 20%. The second mistake I see is leading with product features or services features. You don't want to talk about your product specs. Instead, talk about their problems. Nobody buys a product or a service based on the capabilities or the features. They buy for solving a specific problem. So that's what you want to talk about and ask questions about, are their problems versus the features of your product. Now, the next mistake is being afraid of objections so they don't pick up the phone at all. Objections are part of sales. And at the end of the day, lean into them. That means they're at least engaged when they give you an objection. It's better than just hanging up. Nobody really hangs up in B2B sales. They're at least engaging with you. And that's a gift. Detach from the outcome. Your goal is not to convince every single person that answers the phone to book a meeting with you. That's just not going to happen. When you're cold calling and you get an objection, use it as information. And also, you need to completely detach from the outcome. Your goal is not to convince every single person you talk to to take a meeting with you, because the fact of the matter is you can't solve everybody's problems, and it's not the right time for everybody you talk to. And a lot of the people that you talk to already have their problem solved or already have a vendor, or it's just not the right time. So use it as information. You might keep track of, hey, I call at 4 o'clock every single day and I get the same objection over and over again. Well, maybe you need to just change the time that you're calling. Or maybe the objection you get the most is, hey, we already have a vendor for that. Maybe you're not clearly articulating what it is that you do when you talk about a specific problem that people like them in their industry have. Maybe they think you do something else. So you need to use what you get as objections as information, detach from the outcome, and it makes objections a whole lot less scary. Next is giving up too easily. And this is a mistake I made way early in my career. I would cold call really hard for a day, maybe two, and then I would quit because I wasn't booking any meetings maybe those 2 days. Cold calling is a sport. It takes a lot of effort. You need to take breaks. You can't cold call for 5 hours straight. You need to stick with it. When you get the objection, not interested, or I'm too busy, it just means it's not right now. It doesn't mean never. So stick with it over long periods of time. It's a marathon, and your job isn't going to be to convince every single person. Not every person is your ideal customer. Heck, some of the people that would say yes to you aren't even people you want to do business with. So stay consistent. Do the things we've talked about. And if you do it every single day and build it into your operating rhythm, over time, you will see success from cold calling. Just track your metrics and figure out what's working so you can figure out what works for you. And the last mistake that I see far too often is not having a clear next step when you get off the call. So when they tell you that they've already got a vendor and they're in a 3-year contract, end the call with a clear CTA. Okay, great. I'll follow up on June 30th, 2026. If they agree to a meeting, get a call booked on calendar and get them to accept it before you get off that call. If they tell you that now's not a good time, find out what the right time is. Always end with a CTA and have some direction of where you're going on that next step. You don't want vague, ambiguous next steps. At the end of the day, cold calling is a skill that improves with practice. The more calls you make, the more comfortable you'll get, and your results will get better over time. If you want to accelerate your learning, I've put together a complete cold calling toolkit for B2B tech sales. It includes cold call scripts and frameworks for different industries that use objection handling techniques more than what we just covered on today's video, as well as research templates to make your research 10 times faster using AI. As I mentioned before, the link is in the description below, but most importantly, start making cold calls tomorrow. Pick 10 prospects, do your research, practice this framework, then start making calls. That's how you build confidence and start building pipeline via cold calling. Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's video. If you're getting value from this video, do me a huge favor, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video.